welcome to another episode of Chicken Chat. Today, we are going to be sharing some of our favorite winter tips for our coops. I have two special guests with me today. I have Linda and Megan. Hi,
Hello.
ladies. Thank you so much for joining me. So, before we get started, let's talk a little bit about what the winters are like where we live, kind of where about we are. So, Linda, I'll let you go first.
I am in Northern Ohio, and the winters can be cold and snowy, but lately they've been a little bit mild, and I would say with much less snow, although we have definitely had days where the temperatures are cold, like 0 and below cold. I don't like
Wow.
those.
Oh, ooh. Yeah, I know. I agree. Megan, where are you at?
Okay, so I am in Texas and snow is a novelty. It's not a thing around here, really. So, really, we have a week or two where we have bouts of like freezing. And the scariest thing is black ice, which you really don't have to worry about much here with the chickens, but sometimes it'll get pretty low. It's really that wind chill that gets us more than anything. So, yeah, no snow, but it still gets cold ish. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure Linda and I could send some down to you.
right.
We'll express you
Please,
some of our
actually,
snow.
preferably December 25th, if you don't mind.
Oh,
Just
there you go. Yeah. I'm a little similar to Linda. I'm actually a bit more north,
more north.
northerner. I'm just making up words here. More north than Linda, so
North.
I'm right
Oh,
along the
okay.
lake. And I'm in the snow belt, so we get the lake effect snow. But I can agree with Linda in that our Ohio snow and winters have not been as bad the last couple years. Although I'm saying
Mhm.
that now, and we'll probably get a ton of snow this year. But the big
Probably.
thing for me is the wind. Yeah, the wind and kind of just that cold moisture we get from the lake. So yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how do you prepare your coops for winter, Megan?
Okay, so I have a mobile coop and it has an empty bottom. So not an empty bottom, it has like mesh on the bottom, like a good hardcore wire. And we basically put a layer of good gracious, it's like, oh gosh, I should have the name of this on the top of my head, but I don't. It is like just a plastic. So we cover it in a good plastic around the edges on top where it basically has our flow, our ventilation system, and then on the bottom. So it's off the ground, and that actually kind of not as hard during the winter, but it's perfect during the summer. But we just have to make sure that breeze coming up doesn't get through. So we'll normally put that down on the bottom over the wire and then put hay on top of that just to give it some warmth um, for the winter season. And now I say winter season, and for us, that's like 2 months. Like we have it there for 2 months max,
Yeah.
where we know it's going to get really, really chilly and really, really cold. So I also, the way that my coop is, I have a slanted roof, one angle roof. And so we normally face that north where the wind kind of just goes right over it and nothing goes in those ventilation areas. So it's really not hard. It's really easy, but it is something we have to do to keep winterize the coop. And it's a very simple winterization. So yeah.
That's good. What about you, Linda?
Um, for me, it's mostly just starting off with a good cleaning, everything except the spider webs because I like them and I keep them. Um, they help not to have the wasps or yellow
There you
jackets
go.
next year,
Yeah.
so I try not
Yeah.
to mess with spider webs.
Mhm.
Um, and then after a good cleaning, there is some extra stuff that I may try to do. Um, Sometimes I'll add things onto the walls for the winter to help just less draft. I use various items. It depends on what I have around. It could be a tarp, it could be cardboard, it could be feed bags. It really could be anything, just so that when we have those real cold days, there's not draft and wind.
Mhm.
And I
Mm,
do pick up extra shavings or straw or hay for the winter to have on
mm,
hand, so that if it's wet, I can have something to throw down when it's wet. Or
mm,
you can use those kinds of things too, also stacked up against. For me, the wind usually comes from the south or the west. So
mm.
sometimes on those walls, I'll stack that stuff extra just to make sure that, they're not getting that extra
Additional.
draft.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. For our setup, we actually have kind of like a lean-to attached to our barn, and we actually moved the coops into the lean-to. Our first year, we
Wow.
attempted to keep everybody out, but out in the outside, we call it the summer coop. But it was too much. So yeah, so we just, especially now that we have everybody on tractors, we just put the tractors in to the lean-to. That gives us better access to water and electricity if we want to use a heated water.
Oh yeah.
Um, we do kind of what Linda does, and on the side of the lean-to, we'll kind of like stack our supplies there, and it helps break that wind a little bit. And we actually start pretty early. Now this year it's been kind of a mild fall, but we moved our birds into the winter coop about a week ago. So we usually move them
Wow.
around the
Yeah.
end of October, early November, and they'll actually stay in there until probably the beginning of April. Years we've tried to go into November, and we've had snowstorms. so,
So have
um,
either
so
one of
we kind of
y'all had
hmm?
freezing weather yet?
No, no,
Okay.
we've
Okay.
had some
We need to
cold
spread.
nights, but
Okay.
not. We haven't had the snow yet, which is kind of it's surprising that we haven't had, at least
Yeah.
for me, we haven't had something yet. So, but yeah, we move them pretty
Early.
early, and it just makes chicken keeping a lot easier in the
Well,
wintertime.
it's the
Chicken,
prep,
mm,
like when you make
mhm,
when you're ahead of the game, it does. It makes it easier. That's good. Yeah.
absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your favorite breeds. So for me, I love my small birds, so I actually have a lot of Bantams, and surprisingly, they do very well in the winter time. I don't have any problems with them. I also choose breeds that have the smaller combs. Um, for the smaller birds like our silkies, I do put a heat mat, one of our heat
Oh
mats
yeah.
from
Mhm.
our website. I kind of like nylon tie it to the wall so they can lean on it. But I I have like one bird that uses it. It's not even a silkie. So I'm putting them there to make me feel better, and they're not even using it. But
It's still
yeah, we just
radiating some heat.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But we really just focus on the breeds that have those smaller combs. What about either of you?
Go ahead, Linda.
My favorites are the Americanas and Easter eggers,
Mhm.
primarily for personality. But even when I have like the silkies or Polish or, things that seem like they might be more fragile, they have always done just fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I may throw in some hay or something for them, or on the real cold days, that's when I keep the coop closed and everybody stays in. So it seems if you just kind of pay attention and monitor things, that they all can do just fine.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
absolutely.
I will really have to agree with that. We have about 70 and they're all free range. And so I was really worried about adding any feather feet or any Polish. And this last winter was our first winter with the Polish and the feathered feet. And my favorite breed is a golden copper Moran, and they did great. They did wonderful. And so so did my Polish. And so
Yeah.
the only thing, and I'm going to be the devil's advocate here, and I'm going to say my white leghorn. I love white leghorns, but they just have such a hard time in the cold. And
Mm,
every year that I've had a white leghorn, they have lost their comb. whether I have, and I don't know if it's the moisture content, and we've been trying to work that out and figure that out in that mobile coop, but
Yeah.
a leghorn has lost their comb, and so to frostbite.
Mm.
Last year we even put a balm on it beforehand. Anyway, it's just we've had a really hard time with white leghorn. So I will have to say they are the opposite of my favorite is the white leghorn when it comes to winter. So they
Yeah.
lay amazing. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, they
yeah,
are amazing. You definitely have to watch those combs.
yeah.
Another thing that we do is we have a light Brahma and our chocolate Orpington, and those are like we call those like our mama birds. We added those into the coop, and the all the bantams kind of go around them, and they kind of
Oh,
like
but the warmth because
help to
they're
keep
like
everybody
thicker.
warm.
Yeah.
Um, and then also, I know Linda can comment on this. My waterfowl, they
Uh-huh.
could care less if it's snowing. They love it. I've actually seen them try to swim in the snow. They really really enjoy being out in the cold. It does not phase them at all. Yeah.
Not at
Yeah.
all.
Oh,
So we talked a little bit about where we live and our favorite breeds. Do either of you add anything extra into your flock's feed during the winter time?
I'll go first on this one. So yes, we up the scratch game. So up the scratch game and the corn. I know there are some people who don't want corn at all in their feed, but with us, it works great, and it just keeps their gives them a little extra carbs, a little extra warmth. And so we'll add the ratio will be a little extra scratch than we normally would do. So
Right.
and it helps them the morale, I guess. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? You know what I mean? Like it's more of a treat as well. So
Mhm.
more scratch
Hmm.
equals, happier birds. But anyway, which kind of ups the egg game. So which is what we want in the,
Right.
keep it up in the winter. So yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Linda?
I do a little bit of that. It's not something I do all the time. Again, it's to me one of the things I watch the weather more,
Yeah.
and I will definitely give it to them, particularly if I have to keep them closed in.
Yeah.
I kind of throw down fresh shavings or hay or whatever, and I'll sort of bury it in, so they've got to do some digging and get themselves busy. Um, it's I keep it on hand, so if I feel like it's a day that I think it's chilly and they need some extra calories, I definitely give it to them. But it's also something the last couple of years it hasn't been like a all winter kind of thing because we really haven't needed it too
Good.
often.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we do the same. We just make sure we have extra scratch on hand. But I'm kind of with Linda. We watch the weather and we see if they're really going to need it or not.
Yeah.
Um, We also make sure we have mealworms too. That gives them a good kind of protein boost, and it's a like you said, it's a boredom buster.
Yeah.
They enjoy those. We also will, especially if it's going to be really cold, we'll save things like bacon fat, or we'll use some coconut oil, and we'll mix that in with the scratch to make kind of like little flock blocks or feed
Yeah.
blocks, whatever you wanna call them, and we
Mhm.
throw those in, as well to give them a boost, but, yeah, it just all depends on the weather if we're gonna give them extra treats. They get treats all the time. My
Yeah.
flock
See,
is
and mine
spoiled.
don't. Mine are opposite. Mine are for like, you know, free range, and they just are give me
Right.
eggs.
Yeah,
Anyway, that's funny.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So speaking of boredom busters, does anybody have anything else they do to keep their flock busy during the wintertime, especially if you can't let them outside?
So mine go out normally either or. I mean, like we don't have the capabilities to keep them in.
Yeah,
The mobile coop is too small. So when it comes to boredom busters, more or less, we will put um, leftovers or apple cores or whatever out in a certain spot to get them out of the wind, because believe it or not, it can be -20 and they're still like just out, just not trying to get behind something or away from the wind. So we purposefully feed or throw our scraps in a certain area. Really would be the only boredom buster, I guess, that we would do just to get them out of the wind.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Linda, do you do anything?
Not too much more than what I said before, and also sunflower seeds. That's the other thing too that I keep around to give
Mm,
Yeah.
them. But mine also free range, so for the most part, they're out. I keep them in when it's, if we're looking at the teens and below, like if it's
Yeah.
going to be 15 or so under or single digits wind chill and temp. And that's when I want them locked in, and I'll try to give them the extra treats and things and make them get up and move around and have to dig for stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm kind of a little bit of the opposite in that if it snows, the birds are not getting out. We've actually seen they'll like run to the edge of the snow and they're like, nope,
And
and turn around and go back. So we do need to keep stuff on hand to keep them busy if they can't go out. So we'll do things like you mentioned, like we do the kitchen scraps, which we kind of
uh-huh.
do all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll hang things like I have
Yeah.
we've made a apple hanger
Apple.
on YouTube. I've hung that in their coops. Or I've hung just like a ball of cabbage or lettuce for them to pick at.
Mhm.
So we've done that. I also like when it's like now, I will find some logs and I will drill with like a hole saw, like 1 inch holes in the
Uh-huh.
log. And then you can mix peanut butter or coconut oil with scratch and fill those holes and just put that in the coop. And they go crazy for that. It's kind of like a chicken take on a suet feeder for
Yeah.
the wild birds. So we do that. We try to give them like more natural things. We'll like drag in some, you know, boughs from the trees or some twigs or logs or whatever and let them scratch. They love just scratching at the logs. So we try to get creative with the boredom busters, but also try to keep it more natural. We do have some things like the chicken swing and stuff like that, and they just kind of look at us like, "What's that? Why is that in here?" So we try to give them nice natural boredom busters, but it is important for us to have a
Yeah.
plan
In
ready
the
to
run.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they can stay
Yeah.
busy. Because if they don't stay busy, if our birds do not stay busy, that can lead to pecking and bullying and things like that in the coop, and we obviously don't
Yeah.
want that. So, yeah.
Yes.
Megan, you mentioned a little bit about frostbite, and that is definitely something to keep in mind when you're choosing a breed for your coop. If you live somewhere where it's going to be very cold or it's going to be very snowy, then a breed like the White Leghorn is not going to be a breed that you would like to have in your coop
Yeah.
because of that comb.
Yeah.
Um, there are many options out there. You can make your own comb balm. You can,
Yeah.
just kind of keep an eye on your bird, but it can be a little bit more tricky if you have
It
those
can, and I
larger
really
comb.
think it's situational as well. So
Yeah,
we're in Texas. It's hot in Texas the
right.
majority of the time. And if I had somewhere where they were able to stay and put inside and the moisture content wasn't as high, I think leghorns would be my go-to because
Right,
they honestly lay better than anything I've ever had.
right.
Pardon. And but it's that the type of coop that I have and just the rare few, it's really normally not 2 days. It's normally we have almost a week of, you know, a deep freeze for a week and then it's back up
Mm,
to 80s. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's a weird situation. Um, but like I said, they lay great. It's just here specifically, they've had a really hard time in that
Mm,
drop. Now the balm that I have made a balm and it works great on all the others that aren't quite as big. Like even my cream
right.
leg bars, they didn't have a problem as much as my white leghorns. So and those have a similar comb, but the balm works really well. I just the white leghorns. That makes me sad, actually.
Oh.
I like them. I like them.
Oh, putting that comb balm on.
Yeah,
One year we had like they said it was gonna get cold, but they didn't say how fast it was gonna get cold. And we're like out there like holding the birds, like we're trying to help you, and I'm freezing. I'm trying to put this comb balm on them so they're gonna be okay overnight, and it
yeah.
works great. But yeah, it's definitely everybody
So,
just wanted to get warm.
yes, getting it on that type of bird, the active type of that, yeah, that's a challenge too. So it
Oh
comes with
yeah,
its own stories.
right, exactly.
love those.
Linda, have you had any experience with having to use the comb balm or the larger combs?
Not too much. I find that my coop stays pretty dry, so it's
Yeah.
the frostbite's not really an issue because there's not really humidity in there. But
Right.
my tip on that is if you do it at night so that they're
Yes.
on the roost and they're
Yes.
easy to catch.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
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 Another thing I found, because we've had some breeds in the past that did have a slightly larger comb. And one thing we found that really helped was we switched from a waterer that was like, kind of like the tray
Uh-huh.
to a nipple type system that did
Oh,
not
yeah.
freeze.
Mhm,
And they weren't sticking their heads in the water. And that's
mhm.
where we felt like we were getting that moisture from because our coops, our setup's really good. There's not a
Yeah.
lot of moisture in there, but we did have one leghorn that she would, like, rub her entire head
Like
in the
bring
water no matter the season, and, that's where she was picking up that moisture. So just even
yeah.
switching the water out a little bit,
Yeah.
um, helped a lot with that, so, and speaking of waterers and water
Mm.
management during the winter season, you really kind of you have two options. You can go out there, multiple times a day and make sure to change the
Mhm.
water or break that ice, or you can use a heated water. Which Linda, like what have you used with your coop?
I don't have electric in my coop, so I just carry out warm water. I refill it in a can here in the house, and by the time it gets out there and I get it to them, it's usually a reasonable temperature for them.
That's good.
So that's all I do is just, you know, either buckets or milk jugs, whatever we've got, and I just make some trips out there. But I have also um, taken like those rubber pans and put those inside the tire and filled the inside of the tire
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
compost and such that can help insulate it so it takes longer to freeze. And this year I am going to be probably keeping the ducks in the hoop house. So I'm hoping that that will extend my time of keeping the water from freezing as well.
Yeah. I found with the ducks, their water, it has to be really cold for their water to freeze, because they're constantly in there. They're constantly
Hmm.
pecking, the water is constantly moving. So we don't have a lot of problems with the duck water is freezing. I do use a heated water. We have a like the dog bowls, we have those.
Yeah.
We also have like a plate
Plug-ins.
that are yeah,
Mhm.
that
That
everything
go in
sits
it.
that our
Mhm.
heat or water can sit on. Um, with the ducks, they have we actually have a 5-gallon bucket that we've kind of like cut the front out, so they can get their heads in there, but they can't get their entire bodies in there most of the time. And I find that keeps that water from freezing. If we know it's going to be really really bad, then we'll put the heated dog bowl in there for them. But um yeah, they're always in the water, so that's one thing we don't have to worry about is their water freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we free range, and then we also have a lot of other animals. So we have some
Mm,
goats. We have our, nursing goats that are up close to the house, and then our big goats that are out in the pasture. So there's water everywhere. So
yeah.
really, when we have a deep freeze, I also have two boys that go and crack it. But we do
Yeah.
have one or two. We have two plug-in ones that we just kind of put randomly.
Mhm.
Um, However, I did have luck last year with the tires that you were saying, Linda, and a water bottle. Like we put a water bottle inside the water, and that helped regulate the temperature longer. So,
Mm,
anyway, that worked really good. But the tires, I think, were the best. Now, there was one instance, like I said, we have that 1 week of days of freezing, and we literally, my children were homeschooled, and so they were outside with the fire by the big metal trough, and so
mm,
they loved it because they had a book and a fire, and what other, how happier two little boys in a fire and a book. But
mm.
anyway, so we have multiple options, and it really is what works in what area. Like, is there electricity? Is there not electricity? You know what I mean? Different things.
Right.
So.
Exactly. And you kind of learn every year,
Yes. Oh my
you
gosh.
every year you're like, okay, last year that was, we did this, let's change it a little bit for this year and try to fine tune it and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah,
So that's great.
exactly.
That is so great.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like we've got really good setups for our coop. Our birds sound happy.
I think so.
I
I
would
think
say so.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, but
So
always
let's talk.
learning.
Oh, yes,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely. So let's
Always.
talk a little bit about flock health. So,
Mm.
what are some of the things that you watch for when the weather gets really cold? We have already talked about frostbite. We know when to kind of watch for that. But is there anything else that anybody looks for when the weather gets really cold?
I think one thing that you mentioned it a little bit, but just a health check. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's getting cold. Look at their feet. Grab, really examine the birds. Give them, go in at dusk when they're all getting settled down and
Mhm,
really
mhm.
look at them. Know your birds. Know that they are going in healthy and strong. I think that's one of the biggest things health wise that you can do. And then just keep an eye on them. Like, I feel like in the winter, I'm looking, harder at them. I'm making sure that everyone's, there's no cuts, there's no comb color looks great on everybody. And anyway, just, making sure you're ahead of the game. I think
Right.
that is huge when it comes to flock health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any tips, Linda?
Other than what Megan said, I would say just any other odd behavior, because
There
if
you
you
go.
see something that's off, that's
Yeah.
something you wanna know why.
Yeah.
Right.
Know your birds.
Mm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
How about you,
The
Jess?
birds my birds probably wonder why I stare at them so
I know.
much.
My birds
What
have
are
to be
you
used
doing?
to it by now,
What are
right?
you doing?
It's just kind of weird.
I do really watch the legs, the feet.
Mhm.
I have a lot of birds that have the feathered feet. So
Mhm.
I'm keeping an eye on that, if they were in the mud or the wet and then maybe we have a really cold night, I make sure that they're clean, that
Mhm.
they're not, it's not going to freeze on their feathers. Silkies, I feel like, are notorious for getting super muddy on their feet. They'll go stand in the rain just for fun. So so I keep an eye on them and I make sure that they look okay. And I also keep an eye on the ducks' feet. Make sure that they look okay. I mean, ducks, no matter Linda can probably agree, no matter how good you clean, there's going to be moisture in that duck area. So, yeah, just making sure that their feet, there's no spots or anything like that on their feet, and that everything looks good with them.
Yeah, and you mentioned this, and something we didn't mention to begin with was their feet and their roosting bars. So I
Yes.
know we just constantly have a thicker roosting bar, so their
Hmm.
body is fully able to
Hmm.
cover their feet and keep them warm because that
Right.
is huge when it comes to the chickens' overall heat is keeping their feet warm. So we do
Absolutely.
have a thicker roosting bar. And I know some people like turn it for winter and that works too, but we just
Yeah.
keep ours on the thicker side the whole time. So
Yeah, exactly the same here. It's just easier than having to
yeah,
switch it
yeah,
out. Yeah,
yeah,
and the birds like it. So,
yeah, they
yeah,
do.
absolutely. So, what about, does anybody have any tips for emergency preparedness? So, when I was thinking about what we're going to discuss today, I started thinking about some of the big storms that we've had where the snow is like taller than I am. Um, and so we're very mindful of watching the weather. And if we see something like that, especially if they say it's going to be lake effect for a couple days, we do a lot of stocking up. We make sure that the waterers are functioning just perfect, the
Yeah,
heated waterers. Um, do that bird check, make sure everybody looks good before they get started. Sometimes we'll even hang, like, we've saved some shower curtains and we'll hang that like on the entrance of our lean-to
Mhm.
just to protect
extra.
them. Yeah. Having a plan in case we lose power, kind of like those kind of things. Does anybody have any other tips for preparing for some really bad storms?
So when it gets really bad, one thing that has been a lifesaver is my omelet automatic door. That
Oh,
way
yeah.
I can keep it closed for a little bit if I know that I need to move the coop a certain place, or if it, so say we have a north wind and it switches, well, then I really want to move the coop before I let them all out. And so I can keep that closed, it's all on an app, very easy. And I can keep it closed. They stay in, I can move it. Because a lot of times you think that the weather, oh, they said it's not going to be too bad. And then, of course, it like crashes, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
just having that ability to keep them closed if I need to move it or adjust it or something like that, that
Right.
automated door really helps us out just for instances like that, so
Right.
we can control it, if they're out, or so we can move it
Yeah.
and with the weather. So, yeah. What about you,
Absolutely.
Linda?
For me, it's mostly just making sure I always have extra feed.
Mm,
And then
Mhm.
it is kind of a good walk from the house up to the coop. So snow and ice are the other things. There are times that there are some good storms, and it can be a little bit treacherous getting from
yeah.
one to the other.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of the biggest thing. And if there is a lot of snow, but for them, if it's snow but warm enough for them to go out, that's when I'll throw down the extra hay, straw, whatever I have, and
Mhm.
just, give them a place that's dry that they can
Mhm.
still go outside. They can still go do their thing, but that they're not having to walk on snow and ice
Mm,
or mud.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. We have to haul our water and so forth, similar to Linda. And one thing that we found was we bought one of those long sleds, like the
Yes.
racing sleds or
Yes.
whatever, and we put everything on there so we can pull it around in the snow. That's been amazing. It took us like 3 years to figure out, like, we could be sledding the stuff back. Let's make this a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So that's fun. And then sometimes we leave it in the kind of the area, and the chickens like to play on it and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Way more
it's their fun
entertainment.
too. Exactly. It's another boredom buster for them. So the last thing I want to talk about is winter pests. So winter pests, winter predators. So Linda, how do you keep the pests and predators away from your keep?
Predators aren't too much of an issue during the day, other than hawks.
Yeah.
And the area that my birds are in, it's too head over. So it's one of those things that um, hopefully between the guineas squawking and maybe the dog barking, that can be some deterrent. But for nighttime predators, my coop is pretty solid. So as long as they're in and closed in, I don't worry too much.
Yeah.
And then if there's, other types of pests like, insect, I sprinkle DE, all winter.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. What about you, Megan?
Um, Predators, the way that we have everything set up, we have, two big dogs, and I would like to say that our predators are very minimal. But we're always on guard, of course. It's really the
Mhm.
pest. I feel like we have had the pest problem more than anything, and they're just trying to get warm, or they're just trying to get food. And it's really getting into their food. And so we've kind of through the years that has looked different. And hopefully we have it all secure and in a place this year where, the pests won't get it. We've just gone to traditional, Rubbermaid trash cans with the clip lids. And
Mm.
I know we have, my hatchery has those big buckets with the clip lids as well,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
great option. Um, but keep the area clean where the pest can't get under. Like,
Mhm.
we're a farm. We have piles of fencing material or piles of
Right.
tin, and keeping that in a separate, further away from the food or further away from the chickens, and that
Right.
also is something just to be aware of with the pest. So,
Yeah.
what about you?
Absolutely. We see a lot of pests, or not pests, predators.
Yeah.
Pests, we've been really fortunate. We have not had a lot of issues with pests, but we make sure the feed's up, like you said. We keep everything clean around the coop,
Hmm.
all that kind of good stuff. But predators, they're cold and hungry too.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that our coop is really protected from raccoons. We see a lot of possum, fox, and coyotes. We've also had problems. We have a pond right outside from the barn, so we have
Need
to watch for
water.
mink.
Mhm.
So it's just making sure that our coop is really, really secure, that our fencing is really good. Um, and kind of going back to when we were talking about our setups, just when you're preparing for winter, do kind of an overview of your coop. How does the fencing look? How does the ventilation look? Think like the thinnest mink,
Yeah.
and how could they possibly
We
get
need,
in? And
yeah, they will.
and kind of go with that mindset when you're setting your coop up for the winter. But yeah, we've seen all kinds of things try to get in the coop. We had one winter that was bad with a mink, and we learned a lot, and that was about 4 years ago. So now we actually have a game camera that watches the birds. So we see things try to run through, but luckily nothing ever tries to get in anymore. We've also had bunnies, which I'm not mad about the bunnies. They're not predators, but we have bunnies that'll try to get in the where like maybe the birds have kicked some hay out.
Mm.
So we see those kind of things. But yeah, just being mindful of your coop. Think like a predator.
Think like a predator. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
those night guard blinkers, the night guard
Oh
lights
yeah.
that we
Yeah.
have, we put
Yes.
those too around, and those have been really helpful having those in there.
Yeah.
Um, and the night guard tape, we've hung that even in the wintertime. One year we had to really watch for the wild birds when AI became such a big thing.
Mhm.
Oh,
We had some wild birds that were trying to get in our kind of area where the birds were, and we obviously could not have that. So using that night guard tape too was as it keeps things from trying to go into our lean-to or anywhere near the coops.
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool.
Well, if anyone got anything out of this whole thing, I hope it was preparation, right? I feel
Yeah.
like knowing your situation, prepping beforehand and not being caught off guard is the
Mhm.
Absolutely.
one thing you can take away, you know?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, thank you both for joining me today.
Well, thank you
I
for
really
having us.
enjoyed talking with you about winter, and now I'm thinking a little bit about snow. I'm getting a little worried, but it'll be good. I'm prepared. We are all prepared.
We're all ready. We're prepared. There you go.
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly.
It's
And
still
thank you.
80 degrees here, so
Yeah, we're
I
pretty
think
warm
we're good.
today. It's not bad. It's not bad, but it's Ohio.
Very
You
nice.
blink and the weather's gonna change.
Yeah,
So,
the cold front's gonna come in. Have no fear.
right, exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to check out our description below to links for everything that we've talked about today. Well, I think it's time for all of us to get back to getting our coops ready. Thank you
Yep.
so much for watching, everyone.